From time to time, with the images that we are manipulating, we are going to have a problem where we've got to retouch some little marks or blemishes on the picture's surface. I can see one or two here, I can see a small one there, and that's with the image at this size. I can see the results of a little bit of dust on my sensor up there, and quite a large mark there, which, because I've looked in advance, I happen to know is a bird in the distance, but it needs to be much closer. If we're going to have that bird in the shot, it needs to be recognizable as a bird. Here it's so small it just looks like a fault with the image. And there's probably one or two other little marks we can remove, which may just be distracting, although they were there at the time. One of the most important aspects of the tool we're about to use and the technique that goes with it is we work with our image at a large size. Now if we look at the Navigator at the top left of the screen, I've got mine set so with a touch of the Z key it jumps to 1:1. Well, I'm going to move my little square here wherever it lands, but I'm going to move it up to the top left, because what I want to do is to work on that top left corner first of all and work along the image, because as soon as I zoom in I now start to see, look, there's more little spots and blemishes on this image than I first appreciated. And of course we may not see them on a tiny image on screen, but when we come to print it we surely will. So perhaps this is another one of those times as well where we can hit that Shift and Tab key to remove all of the options from the screen, but of course we are going to need the one on the right hand side, because just for the moment I'm going to tuck away my basic changes, and this is the option we need to select, the Spot Removal tool. And as soon as I move on to the screen you can see how the tool works. It works with a brush. Now generally speaking we can change the size of the brush in two ways. We can go over to the right hand side and we can use the slider here. Now as I move away from the slider or off the screen the brush is lost, but here's a real clever feature. As we move up to the size we get a facsimile shown to us, so that I can adjust the size of the brush and view the size in relation to the spots I want to fix. And when I come back onto the screen, there we have it. But there is another way, probably even more interactive than that, but it does mean remembering a keystroke. We have two square bracket keys to the right of the letter P on the keyboard. I'm tapping the one on the right at the moment and you can see what's happening to the brush. It's very convenient to be able to do that both up and down, because we can quickly and easily size the brush relative to the mark we're about to fix. And that looks like a bird in the distance, and maybe I could do with my brush slightly bigger. It's not super critical, especially when we're working in the sky, what size brush we have, but in general terms I think it's just good practice to keep the brush reasonably close to the blemish size you're going to fix. Now we do have two other controls on the right hand side, and to demonstrate one of them, the feather, I'm actually going to make my brush much bigger using that square bracket key, because when I move over here and move the feather along you can see that we get two rings. The center ring is showing us the solid part of the brush we're about to use, and the outer ring shows us the soft part of the brush we're about to use. Now that's pretty neat and useful, but if you notice it was set to 0 by default and the opacity was set to 100 by default. So unless we have reason to change these, and I'm going to guess we probably won't, then leave those as they are and we'll just adjust the size for the job we're about to do. In a few moments I'll come back and talk about the difference between the clone and the heel. For the moment it's set to heel, which I think I use almost exclusively, and I'm going to bring my brush down here, move it over the top of the blemish, and I'm going to click. What Lightroom does automatically is to say, inside that ring needs to be fixed. I need to find a location that's going to replace those pixels in a seamless way, and it's done so there. Now I've just hit the H key on my keyboard just to hide that little symbol you can see on screen. So you can clearly see that the mark that was there has gone. Hit the H key again and the shapes are returned. But here's the really good thing about what we've just done. If Lightroom gets things wrong and it pushes this into an area that makes the repair we've tried to do visible, we can pick that up and we can move it manually. Now it's rare I found the need to do that, but it's good that we can when we need to. What we can also do as well is if we do a repair and then discover that we should have used a bigger brush, move your cursor over the edge of the brush, click and drag, and it will increase the size of the brush and the area that's being used to repair it. But still, we can move one further away from the other to get the perfect result. Generally speaking though, we can always just click and it will do the job for us. Now it's done something slightly different this time, and I wasn't prepared to tell you about that just yet, so I'm going to hit the delete key just to delete that. I'm going to make my brush slightly smaller and we're going to work around here and we're going to fix some of these problems, and I'm just going to click gently and allow Lightroom to do its best work, and we'll see just how many times we have to step in and repair it. So when we're working on an image like this, once we've done the top left corner quadrant, here's another great tip. Just press the spacebar, the hand tool appears, and we can move across, looking carefully as we do. And of course when we see something that needs to go, then we just click and Lightroom will take care of it. It makes dealing with the little dust marks on our sensor an absolute breeze. So I'm going to just move across, and I'll move across the top and just click where I see something that's got to be removed. Now here we can see a dust mite, so I'm going to make my brush slightly bigger to make sure it fully covers that. Double click and a perfect repair. Click and drag. Now you may see that my computer seems to be slowing just a little bit here. Sometimes that happens, but I am working on quite an old computer. This computer must be 8 years old, so by computer standards it's quite slow. But as you can see, not only does it still do the work, but while I'm doing it, I'm also recording a video at the same time. So I'm going to drop my brush size, click, 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 and the tool works brilliantly. So we would generally work around our image in an orderly fashion and make sure we cover all of those little spots, but at any time of course we can always hit the Z key and we know the image is going to drop back to fit on screen, and sometimes we need to do that because we do spot then that we've missed a spot or two. So we can always, let me do this at this size just to show you how effective this is. Even at this size it's going to do a seamless job because I've got enough experience of it to know that it will. There's lots of little dots under the bridge there, but I'll hit escape there because that was an error, but they are, looks like rivets from the bridge support, so I think if I did one of those I'd have to do the whole lot. But I think we've demonstrated that spot brush sufficiently to show how powerful and useful it is. When we're complete, of course, we need to click done. All of the overlays are removed and we can safely move on. Now make sure your flat screen monitor is clean, or you'll have the problem I had a few moments ago where I'm trying to heal using the spot removal tool a little mark, but it wasn't on the picture at all. It was actually physically on my screen. I had to reach over with my finger and brush it away. Now let's go back to the tool for a moment and talk about the difference between clone and heal. When we select the clone tool and the heal, all of the options remain the same. I suppose the best way I can think of to describe this is when we heal a picture, Lightroom selects the area it's going to heal the area with, but it also does a degree of blending for us to make sure that all the colours and the tones all match nicely. The clone tool doesn't do that, because sometimes when we're trying to do this in areas that are not quite so clean as this sky here, smooth in tone I mean, and maybe they're fussy in content, then sometimes it can create a smudge, I suppose is the best way to describe it, and in that case switch to the clone tool and try again, because you'll probably find it'll work fine. Here I have an image that I've been working through the develop module, but there's an obvious problem with this. We've got this broken branch on the right hand side that's extremely distracting, I think for two reasons. One, that it's slightly out of focus. I don't mind the branch going out of focus on the right hand side, the horizontal bit, but the vertical bit, if it's going to stick up in that way, then I'd prefer it to be sharp, but it isn't, so I'm going to endeavour to remove it using the spot removal tool. Now it's hardly a spot, is it? It's a little bit more than a spot. 2 points really. One is that we mustn't be locked into the view that the spot removal tool is just there to remove those little dust marks and tiny little speckles. And secondly, this tool has been improved greatly over the years, and you saw, I think, a little bit of evidence of it, because in some instances a little black pin appeared. Let me demonstrate what that is, and let's see what we can do with the branch on the right hand side. I suppose in some instances we could argue that it's probably better to crop it off, but sometimes in doing so we then spoil the composition. I'm going to use the square bracket keys once again to increase the size of the brush, because I need a brush that's going to cover this area here. I think that's going to be okay, but I'll be honest with you, I've worked with Photoshop and Elements quite a long time, and now Lightroom, and I don't get it right every time, so it's one of those things. I'm going to leave the feather as it's set in the default values, and also the opacity. We're going to do something a little different here. In the previous section we just clicked and allowed Lightroom to just fix the little ring. Here we're going to use a painting motion, and that's what you saw evidence of a couple of times when I clicked and dragged in error and we got a little black pin. So let me give this a whirl by starting there, clicking and dragging down. Takes a few seconds, but what Lightroom is doing is taking the area on the right and it's using the area on the left to fix it. Now the pins mean that we can move away from this and create as many of these fixes around the picture as we like, and every one of them will be independent to the next one. But what we can also do here is the same as we did previously, where we can decide where the repair comes from. So to fix a problem like this, we can maybe step in and move the pin. It's a little bit on the slow side here, so I'll just click and move it a little bit and allow it to do its work. Remember, we're working on a high resolution image here, so we're asking Lightroom to fix millions of pixels here, and I don't think it's too surprising that we need to wait just a second or two for it to do it. But I do emphasize the point that this is a very old machine, and I'm moving it a little bit at a time, and I think I'm zeroing in to exactly where I want this to be. Now that doesn't look too bad. Let me just click outside just to lose that for a moment. We've got a little bit of evidence there. Let me hit the H key and we'll lose them that way. We've got a little bit of evidence there, but it's hardly noticeable, is it? And it would be possible for me to make the brush smaller and do the same sort of repair there. But what we'll do, we'll concentrate on this one down here. So perhaps on this occasion I can make the size of the brush smaller, and I can just paint down in that area, and there, look at the job Lightroom has done for us. Now I'm beginning to gain confidence and I'm becoming ambitious, because what I've got here is remnants of a little bit of food that we use to encourage the kookaburra to come down. So what I could do here is to make my brush a little bit bigger. Let me click to liven the window up and just click over that area. And I'm using the same method we used before, but now I've hidden my overlay, so I need to remember that H key again. So if you lose the overlay, all I need to do here, of course, is to move this down, line it up into place, hit the H key and take a brief look. We've got a little bit of a hint that we've been working there, I think, but just a tiny little amount, not that much at all. But what we could do is perhaps have a look at feathering the edge. So even now, maybe I can move the feather, make a bigger brush, and now hit the H key and make sure that I get whatever repair I do seamless enough that no one is going to notice I've been there. For every picture I produce, I always quarter the background as I demonstrated with the coloured image just previously. And this one would be no different because it's got a nice even tone background. Even now, I can see I've got a little bit of a problem there which is going to need fixing. So if I make my brush slightly smaller, using those square bracket keys once again, and I'll leave the settings as they were before, I'll just click that. And it's been fixed. I better hit the H key so you can see where Lightroom is taking the repair from. But what I would be doing is zooming in up to the top there, because I'd want to look all the way along, holding the space bar here, click and drag, get my picture in position, and then I would work slowly from left to right just as I did before. Anything I saw I would deal with immediately. But I think what we've done so far has been fairly impressive. Now don't forget that H key option, because while it's good, it can sometimes trip us up because we've forgotten that we've touched it. But when we've completed the work we're going to do with the brushes, we can click done and then move on to any other changes we want to make. Now one of the great things about working in this way with Lightroom is if I then decided I wanted to go back to my basic tab and make some changes here. Let's say I wanted to drop the exposure down. Well, the exposure, when it's dropped down, it's not only dropped down in all of the areas I want it, but also the repairs that have been made. So it's now treated as one continual image. And I think those repairs are pretty impressive, and I hope you do too. To bring this section of video to a close, let's take one more look at the problem caused by dust on the sensor of a digital SLR. Anyone who changes lenses is going to get those small pieces of dust that will settle on the sensor of the camera, and they show up as little tiny ghostly rings. Now if I just bring back my panel on the left for a moment and we can see the Navigator, I'll hit the Z key to jump up big and click over to the right here, a little bit further I think, and you should be able to see one of those little ghostly marks if I can find it. There it is, it's disappeared. Now there's the problem we have. There's the little ghostly mark, but even with the image at 1:1 size, I was having difficulty locating it even though I knew it was there. So you can see the problem here. As careful as we are in dealing with these spots, and as good as the spot removal tool is to do that job, we have to get all of those spots and fix them. So let me show you one other option that Lightroom gives us to be able to do that. I'm going to hide that panel on the left hand side once again, because I think we need as much space as we can muster, and I'm going to click into the picture space or hit the Z key to take the picture back to fit on screen. If we go and select the spot removal tool, down at the bottom of the screen we have something called Visualized Spots. Now why this isn't included in the sliders up here where we're working with the brush, I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure it's a technical matter, and at some stage perhaps it will be moved. But if I tick this, you can see exactly what happens. picture turns a strange black and white, but what it does do, look how clearly it reveals, and I've got a slider here to be able to do this. Look how clearly that reveals all of the little dust marks on the sensor which has been transferred to my sky. Now I think I was having trouble seeing one or two of these, but there's many more. Now I can see them very faintly. And what's even better about this tool is we can work with the brush here on this particular window. So all I've got to do is to set up my brush size, click, and you can see it's fixed in the normal way. Now in normal circumstances we would have terrible trouble seeing all of these, but even though I'm working with an image here that's not been enlarged, we're working with it just fitted on screen. We're making the most of the screen, getting rid of the panels, but as you can see, even while I'm talking, it's not a great problem, is it, to just click around this image and fix all of these little dust spots, because there really is nothing worse than waiting until we get the image rolling off our printer until we spot one sitting right in the middle of the sky, or the image appears in the camera club competitions and there you spot that dust spot that you should have dealt with but missed. And in that short time we've dealt with them all. Don't forget to look around other areas of your image though, because sometimes on flat wet sand, what we have at the bottom of this image, it may show up dust spots there too. I'm not sure if these ones down here are, but what we can do is fix them anyway, because I doubt it's going to do any damage to our image, and in a second or two we'll commit this tool and we'll take a look at the job we've done. So down at the bottom right here, click done, and now we can be really well assured we've got no stray spots in the sky that are going to pop up to surprise us later.